I'm not surprised you picked up on that by looking me up. So
yeah.
I did a lot of research on him, by the way.
Todd knows all kinds of questions. Yeah.
Last thing I'll say with Larry King is because he fell asleep a lot, he said, why don't you just go on the air as me? Can you do my voice? And I went, sure. So I would sit there many nights. I'd always call my parents in Springfield, New Jersey, who were listening on WOR radio in New York. And they knew, if the phone rings, it's me. And I'd say, turn on Larry. I would just say, Portland, you're on the air. San Francisco, you're on the air. Bangor, Maine, you're on the air.
When I saw Springsteen at the Darkness on the Edge of Town. And I remember he came into the audience. I think he was singing Sandy, 4th of July.
Right.
And he was probably 20 rows in up the center aisle, and he just sat there and played, and it was a phenomenon.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Reverb Podcast. This is where we talk to fascinating people about the way they think and the wisdom that they've learned along the way. And we like to have some fun as well, right?
Absolutely.
Sherm, here we are again. I'm excited to talk about all kinds of interesting things that we think about in our spare time between when we see each other.
So others don't have to.
Exactly. That we're here to solve problems of the problems that people don't know they have.
Yeah. So I used to call that creating a market in my professional job.
We're in business development of problems. So you and I have been chatting about this for a while, but we wanted to just check in on these memories of things that we remember as kids that our parents would tell us. And I'll start off with this one that's been bugging me for a while. And it was when almost anything that would happen where there would be an object that my mom was certain was going to poke somebody's eye out. It didn't matter what you were doing.
Anything.
It could have been a hot dog. It's like watch where you're waving the pizza slices. The pointed part, it could poke somebody's eye out.
And any Nerf product kind of matched that. Really.
Nerf product. And it occurred to me, so I looked this up because I thought, okay, how many people's eyes were getting poked out back when we were growing up? And I'm pretty certain it wasn't a lot. Like, I don't remember seeing a lot of kids with eye patches coming into school going, geez, what happened? Oh, my eye got poked out this weekend.
I had pizza on Saturday.
Right. Yeah. Pepperoni. Yeah. No, there was very few kids with eye patches. I just don't think people's eyes were getting poked out. So I looked it up. Today, there's about 2.4 million eye injuries across the country. But when you try and dig into that research, there's very little data on eyes actually plopping or sort of coming out of the socket.
Like movies.
Yeah, like movies. There's not a lot of that.
Yeah.
No. So I'm hoping one day we're going to have callers on the show and somebody's going to call in and go, hey, my eye got poked out. And then they have a whole story. And I'm like, oh, wow, your eye got poked out. And
validate every mother in the country back in whenever it was.
50s, 60s, 70s. So then I think the discussion we've been having is how was information passed around back then, right? I mean, the internet has some great benefits and some horrible things from it as well, right? All this disinformation and people are just making things up. But back then, it was just an organic way of making things up.
Yeah, and I think the other part of this is when you're a kid, you really don't have the mental screening going on to say that could be true, that might not be true. Let me analyze that. So when you're a kid and your parents say stuff,
you just believe it.
You believes it and becomes part of your foundational belief. And pretty quickly thereafter, you really don't even question it anymore until, I don't know, maybe you're on a first date and you get a look from the date who says,
yeah, right. Like she's
really? Really?
Right. Like, she's like, hey, you have your extra fork? Watch it. Don't poke my eye out with that thing. And they're like, what are you talking about?
I could have died. There. Yeah.
So I think I laugh because my mom used to use that all the time. Like, watch out, you're going to poke somebody's eye out with that. And so I think to this day, I still have a little guttural instinct that there may be something that pokes my eye out.
Yeah.
I could...
I've never seen you eat pizza. Back to that one there.
Yeah.
My mother used to, I don't know why, she grew up in Detroit, but she would drop into a Southern accent in moments like this. And
Oh, really?
I remember as a kid, something would happen and she would say, I don't care about that one iota.
Oh, yeah, I heard that a lot.
And I, up until probably my 30s, I thought what she was saying is, I don't care about that when I order. Well, actually, no, I should back this up a little. It'd usually be when she was telling me to do something and I didn't want to do it, like, clean your room or the bathroom or something like that. And I would have an excuse.
Wait, so you thought the iota was like she was ordering food like, I order some French fries.
Yeah, exactly. For those listening, that was Gary doing a Southern accent.
Terrible Southern. But I'm trying to figure out how to get iota. Hey, how y'all doing? Iota some food. It doesn't sound like
that again was Gary doing a Southern accent.
Hey, anyone in the South? My mom's from the South, and we love all of you. So don't take it as an insult. It's just I'm trying to figure out how he has a Southern accent. Iota. I guess it kind of sounds like that.
There may have been a martini in between there somewhere. Not just moving to the South, but a martini on the way to the South. So anyhow, I thought that's what that was until way late in my life.
That she was ordering something.
No, that she was ordering me to do something when I order.
Oh, when I order you.
Yeah.
So when I order,
I don't care about that when I order because I as I was saying, I should back this up. It was usually in a case where she was asking me to do something and I was saying, I'm not going to do it or just didn't do it. And I would have an argument and back and forth. So
now when your wife says, hey, one iota those dishes, get the do you think you're being ordered around?
Oh, I didn't even think about it. I just get on it.
Yeah.
Damn dishes. and I think we're going to leave it there. We should get on with the episode today.
So for sure. As a listener out there, if you've had like a funny saying that your parents said, leave it in the comments. Like we would love to see what do you remember that their parents said that was either wrong or it's just like a crazy saying that you're like, why would you tell me to do that?
Or screwed you up for life.
Yeah.
Or a fair chunk of life.
Yeah, set you off the wrong trajectory. Yeah. Something that ruined your life. Tell us about that.
What did your parents do to ruin your life?
Write that in the comments and we'll send it off. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Reverb Podcast. This is where we get a chance to talk to fascinating people about the way they think and the wisdom they've learned along the way. And we are super excited to have Mitch Slater with us today. Mitch is a good friend. He also, I know him through a colleague at work as well. But Mitch, thanks for being here. Super excited to have you.
It's my pleasure, Gary and Todd. I'm honored. I'm very honored.
I know some things about your past, and rather than doing a big introduction, I thought it would be more fun to just have you tell a little bit about yourself in terms of the journey you've been on. We try and talk on this podcast a lot about just what has the journey been like career-wise. You don't have to give us the War and Peace version, but I know you got some really cool stories. So tell us, how did you get started in the entertainment industry? Because that's the direction you were going in. And then it flipped to finance. And then now it's kind of coming back full circle. So give us the journey. What does that look like?
It's interesting to ask that question because I actually just put a video on LinkedIn a little bit with a message for graduates and also for their parents, basically saying, don't worry about their 20s. Let them do what they're going to do. And really that message is not so much a message that kind of happened to my kids as well. But, as far as I'm concerned, the furthest thing I ever thought I would be doing was anything in the financial world. I mean, I think to this day, I had the lowest math SATs in New Jersey history. I actually found some report cards and I don't think I ever got above a C in any math class. I didn't take a business class in college. I was all about being an actor or being in music and then eventually radio, TV. Just very creative. I was the star of the show of all the shows at school, high school, camp, everything. I wasn't a theater kid per se, even though I did study at Northwestern in an amazing program in the summer of 1977. Charlton Heston was actually one of the professors, which was kind of cool being taught by Moses. But it was
Yeah.
that was an amazing summer. There's a story with that too, but we'll hold that one. You know, I think I had an aunt that was in the theater. She wrote screenplays. She wrote Broadway stuff. She wrote for Steve Allen, who was kind of the predecessor to Johnny Carson. And I just, loved everything entertainment. And then I didn't get into Northwestern to study for college because of my math SATs, but I got into school in DC, and I, started out thinking I'll be an acting major. And then I think the first or second day I was there, I met this guy who was working at the radio station, had this great conversation about music. And he said, why don't you join the radio station? And you put me in front of a microphone, and that was it. And I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. We were WRGW, the voice of GW. Our claim to fame is we brought the Clash to the U.S. That's not true, by the way, but that was our claim to fame.
Oh, really? Wait. Why did you get credited for that? And it didn't have because I love the Clash. I saw the Clash when I was 15. So
they were doing a tour in DC, and it was myself and a guy by the name of Alexander Baldwin, and I'll tell you the rest of that story in a minute. And we just reached out to their people, and we invited them to play Lisner Auditorium, which was right on campus. And they were big, but they weren't huge yet. They were big, and so we always claimed that because we brought them to DC. But I just loved it. I loved being on the air. I was on the air the night John Lennon died. No one was listening except maybe my girlfriend, who was in the Rathskeller, having a beer or something, because it was closed circuit. But I just loved it. And I did some theater in college, but I just realized this is what I want. And I went after every internship, and that was really my focus throughout college. And one of my internships was at the rock radio station in DC, DC 101. And on a Friday afternoon, they told me, we fired our morning guy. I need you here early Monday morning, a little earlier. He's crazy. He's from Detroit. We don't know much about him. And in walks Howard Stern following Monday. And I am the only guy in the radio station. And a lot of this is in his movie. I couldn't make it up. But they immediately put me on air. I told them I'm not allowed to be on air, that I don't have proper licenses, whatever. They were telling me, just put the cans on, go into that other studio, and boom, he's on the air. He says, oh, by the way, what's the big highway here? And I said, it's called the Beltway. He says, all right, boom, I'm hearing dinosaurs in my ear. And he goes, hey, it's Howard Stern in DC 101, kick-ass rock and roll, or whatever, I think it was. And he goes, and our boy Mitch is out on the highway, and Mitch sounds like having some trouble out there. Now, lucky for him, I'm an actor. I took improv classes. He didn't know this. I played along. It was really, top 5 moment of my life outside of my family was that morning. Unfortunately, I do not have the recording of that one, but it was an incredible experience. I worked with him. I was there when Robin started. I have a running joke with Gary Baba Booey, who I know very well, mostly from my love of Springsteen, because Gary's a huge fan. In fact, I saw him at the Brooklyn show the other night, and he's a little sick of me telling the same story over and over again, that I could have had your job. And he goes, why would you want it? And I said, you have 3 houses, one in the Hamptons that I like. But I love doing that. And that I did other internships. Long story short, last internship I did was for Charlie Rose, who I guess was canceled, so no one really talks about him anymore. But he had a talk show in DC, and one of his guests was my radio idol at the time, Larry King. I did the thing you're supposed to do. I went up to him. I was part of bringing him in the green room, and I said, Mr. King, my name is Mitch Slater. I'm a senior at George Washington. My dream is to be you. I really want to be on radio. I want to learn from you. And he said, meet me at Duke Siebert's. I'm there every day from 3 to 6 o'clock, which was, this place in DC. Yeah. And I met him. I went one day, and we talked for 3 solid hours about baseball. That's all we talked about. Sports. I'm a Met fan. He grew up a Brooklyn Dodger fan.
Yeah. He was a Dodgers fan, right? Was he a Dodgers fan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, those World Series in the early, he died in 21, so maybe 17, 18, whatever. You always saw Larry behind home plate.
huge Dodgers fan, so I remember seeing Larry buying home plate.
Larry's a big fan. And so we just had this conversation. And at the end of the conversation, I said, so are there any openings on your radio show, which was in Arlington, Virginia? It was Mutual Broadcasting. It was coast to coast. It was, the show at the time, talk show. And he called the next day. Actually, I got a call from Tammy Haddad, who wound up being the executive producer of Veep and a lot of other really great shows, and offered me a job. They needed an all-night associate producer, which meant I show up at 10 o'clock at night. I get Larry his coffee, his cigarettes. I try to keep him awake, and I bring the guest into the studio. Now, the guest on Larry King Radio was just like Larry King TV. I mean, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, talk about boy of heroes, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, just Sid Caesar, Milton Berle, Bob Hope. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. I'm 21 years old, making $19,000 a year, and I would give anything to have that job again and have Larry.
Yeah, you're like, I'll do it for free. How do I do this for free?
And I would have done it for free.
Did you graduate from college?
Ironically, I got the job offer in March, and I didn't have a job. I had a stack of resumes, rejection letters from radio stations and TV stations all over America. All right. I didn't have a job. And here it was March. I'm graduating in May, and I started work the following week. So the last 6 weeks of school, including during finals, I was working all night radio. And I just, I loved it. And I said this so many times on my own podcast and other things throughout life. I learned more. Well, all right, of course, I'll say the Bruce line. I learned more from a 3-minute record than I ever learned in school. But I learned more in that experience about life and about how to be a good interviewer and also how to be a good financial advisor at the end of the day was be a good listener and be curious. And Larry was a great listener. He would never prepare for a show, ever. Didn't matter if...
oh, really? He just shot from the hip on that?
He totally shot from the hip. He had paper in front of him he would write. James Michener was on one night, the great author. And, his new book, I think, was Hawaii at the time or Alaska. I don't remember what. Oh, no, Space.
Yeah.
Space. And Larry's big book sitting there. And Larry basically said, I think his first question was like, "Is a big book, weighs a lot," something like that. But Larry, what Larry did, Larry said to me many times is that he never learned anything with his mouth open. All right, you got to be a good listener. So, for example, if we're on a podcast right now and I'm talking about this. And then I just start saying, and that's why I had to kill my wife. And then anyway, the next day, so basically you'll miss the big thing. So Larry always tried to put himself in the ear of the listener, which was people that were mostly insomniacs that were in bed somewhere in America, calling in like crazy. And he would think, well, what are they thinking? What do they want to ask? And that's kind of how he ran it on radio. That's how he ran it on CNN. That's how he ran it afterwards on cable and other stuff he did. And honestly, I forgot
about that. He did it. Oh, yeah, he did it during the night, and there was callers calling in. And you're like, what are these people up at like 2 a.m, right? Because they play this back during the day, right? So
and we had there was somebody known as the Syracuse Chair. There was the Portland Laugher. I mean, we had all these people from all over the country that were regulars. Plus, I had the carts of different stories that I would put in throughout the night when Larry wanted to sleep or whatever. And last thing I'll say with Larry King is because he fell asleep a lot, he said, "Why don't you just go on the air as me? Can you do my voice?" And I went, "Sure." So I would sit there many nights. I'd always call my parents in Springfield, New Jersey, who were listening on WR radio in New York. And they knew, if the phone rings, it's me. And I'd say, "Turn on Larry." And I would, I would just say, "Portland, you're on the air. San Francisco, you're on the air. Bangor, Maine, you're on the air."
It sounded like you had a pretty good impersonation of him. I kind of heard a couple of rips here. What do you have?
I had a deep voice. I have a deep voice, and I just, and I would just riff, and I just played along until Tammy Haddad found out. She was not very happy. That's not why I left. I left because someone had the idea that Larry should do a TV show. However, it was only Ted Turner that figured out, let him do what he does. And this was somebody that thought he could be Johnny Carson. And we did a pilot for a TV show, which was terrible. But I was like a production assistant on it. And it just made no sense. It was just, but the guy who was the executive producer was starting a game show in Los Angeles and asked me if I would like to move out to LA and be an associate producer on the show. And I'm 23. And I asked Larry, I said, Larry, I'm loyal to you. He says, you gotta go. You gotta go. And I did. I got in my car and I drove cross country, and the game show was called Fantasy. It was hosted by Peter Marshall and Leslie Uggams. And it lasted all of 6 months because it was opposite the hottest soap opera at the time, General Hospital, which had a arc of Luke and Laura, which was a
right, General
that
Hospital,
whole thing,
yeah.
Right? So that got me out to Los Angeles.
Let's edit that part out. I do not know about General Hospital. Let's just make that.
That's okay. But everyone knew about Luke and Laura. It was a phenomenon, like things are today.
I think he just passed, actually.
He did. Tony Geary died recently.
Hey there, before you swipe away from this video, if you're a new college graduate or just someone exploring where you want to go next in your career choices, this podcast might be of interest to you. Welcome to the Reverb Podcast, hosted by myself, Gary Barss, and my co-host, Todd Sherman. We get the chance to talk to fascinating people, a wide variety of fields. You get to hear what it takes to be an entrepreneur, a surgeon, careers in finance, real estate, the space industry, and many more. We're continually adding each month. We want this podcast to be useful to help not only college graduates, but anyone that has a genuine curiosity about different pursuits and career ideas. So click on the link below and subscribe to the podcast. And more importantly, if you have an interest in a field or topic that we have not held a podcast yet, please leave a comment. We'll work toward adding your idea to the future episodes. Thanks for tuning in.
It got me out to Los Angeles. I had a lot of different production jobs. I worked on the Love Boat for a couple episodes, which was really fun. Robert Wagner was a jerk. He was a guest star. He was the only person that wasn't nice. Gavin MacLeod, one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Years later, I got the opportunity my wife, who's a writer, was a travel writer at the time. And we went on this special cruise that Gavin MacLeod was going to be on. And I wound up hanging out with him. And what a great guy and great stories. So long story short, it wasn't going very well. I had the opportunity to come back to New York because of that Alexander Baldwin guy, Alec Baldwin, as he has gone by the rest of the years. He knew somebody that was working for David Susskind, who was another talk show host who wound up being a TV producer. And I had an opportunity that lasted about 2 months, and then he dropped dead of a drug overdose. Then I went to Philadelphia, worked for my brother's brownie business for a while, and worked in TV and radio in Philly, where I met my wife. And then the summer of 1987, my dad, who worked at Merrill Lynch as a second career as a account executive, is what it was known back then, he asked me if I was ready to get a real job. And my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, was commuting from Philly to New York. I needed a gig. And I met a guy named Bob Mulholland, who was his manager at the time, who wound up running things at a firm that we all know. And he saw something in me. He said, you got communication skills. You can handle rejection. Don't worry about the rest. We'll teach it to you. And they did.
That's true. That's the business, right? If you can get through the rejection, you can communicate, you're going to be successful. So you, Howard Stern, Larry King, and then you also are a musician. Like, do you grow up being a musician, or when did you start working on that?
I've been playing Mrs. Sussman, I think, when I was 7 years old, in a wheelchair, giving me piano lessons. And I just, love to play piano, and I play a lot by ear more than anything. And, played in a couple local bands, nothing much. Obviously, whatever music I was into, I wanted to play. And, I could sit down right now and pretty much do most of Bruce's catalog, but I wind up just playing Racing in the Street all over and over again, Jungle Land. But just, it just came natural to me. I love it. It's a lifelong skill. I'm glad I have. I do wish that I had taken up guitar instead of piano, because, I would see these guys in college, sitting there strumming the guitar, playing some James Taylor, smoking weed, getting the hottest girls. And I'm like trying to carry this piano, and I'm like, this isn't going to work, I think my sex life would have been a lot better in college if I could, play guitar. But
Yeah, this is what Simon and Garfunkel said that, right? Simon and Garfunkel said, "Hey, we need to get into music," and I think it was Simon said, "Why?" And Garfunkel said, "Because we can pick up ladies that way."
Yeah.
And so
It's exactly
Paul
for
Simon,
anybody in
exactly.
yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. So how did you get? What was the connection to Bruce Springsteen? You've been like if I read correctly, you've been to like 250 shows or something like that. Is that accurate?
312, roughly.
Oh, wow.
I may be off a little bit, but somewhere. A lot of 10 nights in a row, 12 nights in a row. Traveling around the country, and you know what? Believe it or not, I was not in 75. I was 15, and Born to Run came out. I had a friend that I grew up with who was into Bruce. I could care less. I Jethro Tull and Led Zeppelin, and that's what I was into. And I missed 3 years. I literally missed those years. And then in 1978, a girl, of course, had these tickets, and I got to go see Bruce at the Capitol Theater, and actually the Capitol Center, outside Washington, D.C., and in the third row, just, they were seats. And the third song of the night, which was Always Spirit in the Night, he comes out and he's literally in front of me playing guitar. Clarence is there on the saxophone. I'd never seen anything like this in my life. I thought, like, I'd been to Broadway shows and, love theater, but this just blew me away. And then I just got intensely into all of his records, and the lyrics spoke to me, and they still speak to me even louder than ever right now with this tour. But they really, really spoke to me. There was an absolute. I always call Bruce my drug of choice. It was just sort of it's a true passion,
right?
And I never, in my wildest dreams, thought I would actually be friends and actually know members of the band years later.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Some of it's gone circle, but love the music.
When I saw Springsteen at the Darkness on the Edge of Town, and I remember he came into the audience. I think he was singing Sandy, 4th of July.
Right.
And he was probably 20 rows in up the center aisle, and he just sat there and played, and it was a phenomenon. It was incredible.
It was absolute phenomenon. And, it was when the movie came out last year, I was trying to explain to the non-believers, like, this is not the Bruce that you think. You're not going to see Born to Run. This is a guy that was suicidal, depressed, and a mess in 1982. That's what Jeremy Allen White is playing in that movie. But yeah, it just is music. I mean, I love all music. I really, I listen to stuff from mostly 60s to 80s, and then I stop, and then I picked up some other artists over the years that I've gotten into. But I just it's music I grew up with. My brother played in a band. My brother used to play Jimi Hendrix all the time, and he had this thing where you could walk into my brother's, who was 7 years older. You walk into his room, and when you turn the light on, it dropped the needle on the record. It was like the coolest thing until one day, apparently I was 7 or 8 years old, and I stuck my finger in the socket and had a little bit of a shock, but which I probably deserved at the time. And the funniest thing is my brother is like the least rock and roll guy in the world now. I mean, he loves classical music, jazz. He loves James Taylor, always has. And he became a Bruce Springsteen fan watching the Broadway show. I think that finally, he started understanding. And then when Bruce and my mom had this thing backstage and met, and it's a long story, but he realized, like, wow, this guy was pretty amazing. So.
Wait a second. Just your terminology. They had this thing backstage. We got to clarify that for the listeners. What are we talking?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So in her 90s, my mom had quite a run. My mom, and I think I get a lot of my personality, a lot of it from her. She was very, just a fun person, grew up in Philly and just, really enjoyed life. And then, my dad was sick in her 80s, in both her 80s. She sort of just like went into a funk. And then, a couple of years after she passed away, she just really so happy to have my kids, because my sister's 10 years older, my brother's 7 years older. So my kids, she got very involved with them in her 80s and 90s. And then she knew how much I loved Bruce and I played music for her for years. And then one day, I'm on Twitter and I get a direct message from Maureen Van Zandt. saying, I really love what you share and you post. I would love to talk to you about being on the board. I see you work at a financial firm. This organization Steven's involved with called Little Kids Rock. Come to the big event that we're having next week, our guest. So I go with my buddy who's a judge, a retired judge now, and he's a guy I've been seeing, David and I have been seeing shows, since 78, including the last show. And we went and they were honoring, it was this great organization that provided music, guitars, Gibson and Yamahas and all kinds of stuff for these underprivileged kids. And also there was so much music taken away years ago. There was No Child Left Behind. And there was no music in class. And Little Kids Rock was just, an organization that was involved with it. And it was, they were honoring Steven that night. And of course, Bruce played and Elvis Costello played and Joan Jett. And I'm like, this is amazing. I will join the board.
Yeah.
And so for the next maybe 4 or 5 years, I got to meet amazing people involved with the big event, which was always incredible. My favorite story from all of the events was, that's music related, is we were at a place called Cipriani in New York, and Brian Wilson was supposed to come. And at the last minute, he insisted, it was a little difficult. He insisted on a private jet to take him. He was doing something in Vegas. And Jimmy Iovine, who Bruce, worked with and produced and sold beats for $1 billion or whatever. Steven was friends with him. Steven called him up and boom, they got him paid for whatever the money was, got him on the plane. So they're doing a rehearsal. It's like 4:30 in the afternoon and people are just setting up, and I'm there because I'm on the board so I could be at the rehearsal. And I'm standing there watching Brian Wilson, and he's sitting and he's singing, I think, with Darlene Love, and he's singing God Only Knows. And this guy puts his hand on my shoulder and he goes, "Can you fucking believe it?" And I looked and it's Elvis Costello. And I'm like, no, I can't. This is like a moment like I can't possibly explain to anybody that Elvis Costello is chatting up with me, watching Brian Wilson sing God Only Knows. It was an incredible experience. But what came out of it was kind of a friendship with Maureen and Steven. In fact, I wound up taking acting classes with Maureen. Maureen teaches acting. She played Steven's wife in The Sopranos, and she taught with Vinnie Pastore, Big Pussy in The Sopranos. So that I got involved with, and separately, I've known Max Weinberg for years through my brother-in-law who went to camp with him. He grew up in the town next door. I'd met him a million times, and I had this nice relationship with him, and it's just everything was coming together. And then Steven decides, bring back Little Steven and Disciples of Soul, and he puts out a record. And I decide, you know what? I'm taking my mom to see this concert. She needs to see this. She's going to love it. And I do videos. So I shot a video of my mom wearing the Disciples of Soul shirt and holding the record, and just like a promo. There's still tickets available, blah, blah, blah. And I tagged Steven. And that night, he did a show in New York City, and after the show, I was able to hang out like I was. Steven had his glass of wine. He comes over to me and goes, "Mitch," she says, "give me your email. I got an idea." Like, okay. Gave my email. Next morning, I wake up. It came at 2:30 in the morning. It's a script. And I read it, and I'm like, wow. He wants my mom to open up tomorrow night's show at this other theater in New York. So
wow.
I'm like, I know she's going to do this because I know my mom. My brother I talked to, he's like, don't even ask her. I went over there and, she's reading it on my iPad and she's like, wait, I said, Mom, there's going to be about 5,000 people. They have this big red curtain at this theater. You're going to be up there. And I will tell you that the rehearsal for that, which just, the sound check was, and I have video on my YouTube page of that, was one of the funniest things. Steven's yelling at the light guy. He's giving her the hand motions, listen to this. And then he sets up a Twitter account for her and it goes crazy. The show goes great. She introduces him. People are taking selfies with her and having all this fun. And
oh, wow.
So East Streeters there. Bruce wasn't there, but a lot of East Streeters there that night. And then Steven just kept, repeating things. And then I get a call from Maureen, or I saw Maureen, and she said Steven wants her to dance on stage. His new record has this song, Soul Twisting, and we want to put her in a boa, and we're having a record release party in Asbury Park at the Paramount Theater, which I knew what that would mean because I knew Bruce always comes to these things. So she did that. It was amazing. And I didn't tell her anything about Bruce, even though I knew what was going to happen a few hours before. And she dances, and who comes to take her off stage? Bruce. And she sits there, Bruce, and she didn't have her hearing aids in, which she regretted later. My friend who took pictures and everything said she was just like blabbing away. And he's like, darling, you remind me of my mom. And his mom at the time was not doing well. And it was just, and then Bruce went out on stage and sang 10th Avenue, and It's Been a Long Time, and, I Don't Want to Go Home, those usual 3 songs of Steven. And you know what? My mom lived to 96 and a half. She would have lived longer if she didn't fall and break her hip, which, ultimately isn't good at that age. But she had a great life, and she had a great time in her 90s. And she had, I don't know, maybe 10 times the amount of followers I've had on Twitter. When she passed away, Steven called me, Maureen called me, Pam Springsteen, who I've gotten to know, called me. I mean, it's like, my dad would have never believed any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
what a great legacy for
Wow.
And the best part of it was, as a son, to be able to help make some of these things happen for your mom in her 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is the greatest gift of all.
I don't think I'll be able to match that with my parents. I'll have to think through some ideas, but yeah, I don't think I've got anything that cool.
And your mother, she was pretty low key prior to all of the stardom that happened.
Yeah. I mean, she was, she played mahjong. She, she outlived everybody. So she outlived her friends, and obviously mostly for her sibling, her sister, my dad's family. And, she was just a lot of fun. She loved candy. My mom, my wife jokes about it because my mom ate, had a candy drawer. She had a sweet tooth. She, her vegetable, like she would serve spaghetti, and for a vegetable, it'd be macaroni and cheese. She just like no idea with that. And her low cholesterol and like low sugar. And, so she just was, she was just a really unique person. And she lives on, through me and my family.
Mitch, just shifting gears here, we were thinking about, I was looking up I know some things about you, but I was doing some research, and there's another Mitch Slater that shares your name. And it was like, there's some correlation, but I'm like, no, this is not the Mitch I know. But you and I talked briefly about that, and you had mentioned that there is a story behind this other Mitch Slater.
I have a story. So It is 1967. I am my first year. I was 6.5 years old, but there's a camp in the Berkshires, Camp Winnetou, that my dad went to, my brother went to. At the time, it was kind of a Jewish camp. Now it's more of a sports camp. It was a little bit of both. And I get there. I'm not even 7. I'm 6.5 years old, and I get into my bunk, and then I meet my bunk mates, Stephen Tabak, Philip Weingold, and Mitch Slater. I mean, you couldn't make
the other Mitch Slater? This is the other Mitch Slater.
This is the other Mitch Slater. So for 1967 and 68 and 69, we were bunkmates. We weren't really close. He was a bit of a wise guy, even at that age. But I have this great picture of us wearing our Camp Winnetou shirts, pointing at each other, that, I always loved. And then years later, obviously he became a great rock promoter, worked with Ron Delsner and promoted a lot of concerts. And, it was a big deal. And I reached out to him a few times, talked to him here and there. I had a financial radio show in New York City in the 90s, and I had him on. And he lived out in Scarsdale. Unfortunately, his health wasn't great, and he passed away about 5 years ago. I think it was either ALS. It was not really bad. I interviewed John Scher, another great rock promoter, on my podcast a few years ago. And John Scher promoted the Grateful Dead. He promoted a lot of the Stones stuff. I mean, it's big deal. He also promoted Bruce at those famous Capitol Theater in New Jersey shows. And, when I first reached out to him, he thought I was the other Mitch Slater too. And I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but he didn't say a lot of nice things about the other Mitch Slater, which I edited out of my podcast. He told me some great stories, though. I mean, my favorite John Scher story, since we're talking music, is the Love and Spoonful Bruce was supposed to warm up for Love and Spoonful at the Capitol Theater, 1975, maybe something like that. And the lead singer, whose name just fell out of my head right now, but he also sang "Welcome Back, Kotter," and it'll come to you in a minute. But anyway, so John Scher is there, and he's sitting. This guy is in the audience watching Bruce's sound check. And what does he sound check? Rosalita. This guy turns to John Scher and goes, I'm not following him. There's no way in the world. He's from New Jersey. This guy, I've never seen anything like this. So he went to Bruce, John, and said, do you mind if you're the main act and the Love and Spoonful will play before you? And he's like, sure. So
seriously, wow.
Yeah,
interesting. Wow. So you've interviewed, I mean, you're a veteran podcaster and many other things you're a veteran at, Mitch, but you've interviewed a ton of interesting people, and I'm sure you have a lot of favorites. But is there one standout interview with somebody that you just remember talking to that you're like just fascinating to somebody that you came across?
I'll knock out Larry just because, Larry was so special, and I'm interviewing him in his home in Beverly Hills. And it was just, I got to interview him a few times. And so I'll take him out of the picture, and I'll take my mom out of the picture, who I also interviewed.
What was Mom's interview?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, but she hung in there. No one's ever asked me that question. It's a really, really good question. I would say, honestly, my most interesting interview was not on my podcast. It was on my radio show, and it was Peter Lynch. At the time, Peter Lynch and Warren Buffett were the gods, right, of everything. And Peter Lynch didn't do interviews, just like Buffett. And a new book had come out, and I just, I don't care about rejection. So I called the publisher, and they said he doesn't do interviews. They called me back an hour later. They said, well, we looked up your show, and, you sound very nice. He's good. He can do it, but he can't go at the time you're doing it, which was Tuesday nights at 7:30. He is available, next Wednesday at 3 in the afternoon. And the radio station, of course, didn't understand how big this was. And then they, convinced them. And, having the opportunity to talk to someone like him, who really, basically invented the mutual fund and put Fidelity on the map. But just, was someone I had such respect for in an industry that I was working at the time. And it was just, listening to him on how he picked stocks and how, he walked around the mall and, his kids, all these people were shopping at this store buying jeans called The Gap. And it was really cool. And it gave me the guts to call Warren Buffett and see if I could get him. And true story, because I couldn't make this up, I literally look up the number for Berkshire Hathaway. It wasn't on the internet, but there was no internet yet. And I call and I go, hi, this is Mitch Slater from WEVD Radio in New York. Is Mr. Buffett available? Sure, hold on. Hey, this is Warren.
Wow, you got him on the phone.
I'm talking to Warren, but I'm sitting there in my office in Short Hills, New Jersey, like, you're not going to believe, I'm talking to. And he could have been nicer. He flatly rejected, I don't do interviews. This is before Becky got involved, and I don't know what Becky did to him, but somehow that happened. And, and he wound up sending me he asked me for my address, and he sent me a letter that I had hanging in my office for years. It was very nice speaking with you. I wish you the best in the industry, and Berkshire Hathaway stationery, Warren Buffett.
Well, that's so cool. Yeah, so, that's the cold call right there to get through to Warren Buffett.
I told that. Yeah, I've told that to a lot of advisors over the years. Like, you know what? You think you can't reach people? Pick up the phone. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, it's true.
Did you get his account?
Yes, of course. I handle all Berkshire.
Handled all of his wealth.
Honestly, I just wanted a discount at Dairy Queen. That would have been fine. But he, it was just being able to interview Peter Lynch was great. But I mean, everybody that I interviewed. I mean, Steve Van Zax Weinberg, Nils Lofgren. Everybody in the E Street Band that I interviewed was just, to me, was crazy. Johnny Resnick of the Goo Goo Dolls lives across the street from me. Can't make that up. And so I interviewed John and actually brought him to the arena that our company is involved in. And
Oh, yeah.
we did
Yeah.
we did a little show there called Advice on Ice, and he played a couple songs, and we become friendly. I've taken him to for my 100th episode, I interviewed Max Weinberg in Danny Clinch's gallery in Asbury Park with an audience and with John.
I think I saw that.
too.
I saw that. That was excellent. Yeah.
So that was really
Max
fun.
is Max still playing music, Mitch, or is he retired now, or is Max still doing things?
Max is a freak. I mean, not only is Max playing on this tour and, knocking out 2.5 hours, and Bruce has got really Murder Incorporated. He's got everything in this, set. But as soon as this is done, he'll take Max Weinberg jukebox out on the road. He loves to play. He takes good care of himself. He had heart surgery, actually similar surgery that I had last year. And he takes care of his body and his hands, and all the remaining East Street band members are in pretty good shape. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Wow. That's
That's what Darwinian evolution will do to you in that business, I imagine. You kind of get right to the point where you're surviving pretty well. So we've talked about two chunks of your career where you were in music, radio, all of that, and then you're in financial wealth management. This sounds like a real high school question here, but what are the similarities or what are the differences between those that really surprised you? Or, there'd be a lot of pretty obvious things, but what were the kind of key things that worked there?
Well, one I wouldn't have said while I was still practicing is that my acting skills really helped me. In some ways, I feel like I played the role of a financial advisor for 35 years. I don't think some people would have appreciated hearing that back in the day, but I learned that, by watching, it's a return on relationship business more than anything. And I really, by understanding the people that I needed to work with or people that became clients, and I almost became like a chameleon and morphed into understanding their lives. So I slow down depending on who I'm talking to. And so the acting thing, is definitely part of it. But I think the main similarities were it does give you the opportunity, if you do it right. For what I was, the investing part was my least favorite. For most financial advisors, it's their favorite. I had a great partner who handled most of that. But the opportunity to give seminars, I built my book of business doing seminars on how to raise financially responsible children. I fed probably the entire state of New Jersey on, all other topics. And so I got up to present, and for me, I got out there. I knew that there was no way that I could do this job just sitting at the desk all day. I needed to get out, and whether it was eventually radio and podcast and a lot of TV that I did, but it was really just speaking engagements and speaking to people. And then even, I kind of felt like I was on stage sometimes when I was sitting in somebody's living room. I felt like here's my performance. So I would say the performance stuff, to me, I was able to be creative in a little bit of a different way. And I was very fortunate to have great partners, my dad for a few years, and then my partner, Ann, who's generously running the book of business. And, I think that was a big part of it too, is having the relationships. But they are very different, but and I guess rejection. that would be the other thing. There's just no way around a business like ours that you have to be able to handle. Not, it's like Derek Jeter, right? It's like 7 out of 10 times someone says no, but 3, you're in the Hall of Fame, right? So,
yeah. The rejection part is such a big part of that business, certainly the entertainment business. And I didn't see that side, but in the financial world, I remember the way we would entertain ourselves through the rejection is people would come up with funny sayings. So I remember one guy would sit in the bullpen with us, and he was cold calling. This is back in the day where you could cold call a lot more. And you heard him, you couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but you heard obviously he's getting rejected. And he says, "Oh, well, when you have so and so call back and you tell him to ask for Mr. Blue." And then he just pauses. Says, "Yeah, because I'll be blue in the face when that guy calls back." So, just stuff like that. People just entertain themselves through the rejection. But
also, my first day as a financial advisor was October 19th, 1987. It was literally the day I got back from my training program. So my first day was the biggest stock market crash, which turned out to be a good thing for me because I had no clients, I had no money, so I didn't have anything to lose, right? But watching how people handled that was a really good lesson for me going forward, because there were very few that handled it well. Most were literally hiding under desks or they weren't jumping out windows. We were on the first floor at that office, but they were not had a tough time with it. I mean, my dad had a heart attack 3 weeks after the crash, which he always said had done absolutely nothing to do with it. And years later, he died in 2009, but in 2008, I remember saying to him when things were really bad in our industry, in the world, just everything that was going on, the financial crisis. I'm really trying to work out really hard because I don't want to have a heart attack like you did. I think it is a very honorable profession, and I have such respect. I mean, one of the real great things about what I do now in working with so many advisors is really get kind of under the hood and see how these businesses are being run. And I am just so wildly impressed with the talent that is out there. I mean, I can only speak for our company, but the talent is incredible. And that gives me a lot of hope that AI it can't replace this business. The human, I'm always quoting Bruce, but the human touch, it still matters, right? And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, you should feel free to break into song if you're quoting him. Actually,
Well, if I was at the piano, I did an interview once where I was at the piano. It was a Bruce podcast. So
you were on the piano.
I had my piano downstairs, and I sang. I think I sang either Something in the Night or Racing, or I don't know, or Little Thunder Road, whatever. Because I had the harmonica.
Kind of a Tom Lehrer thing at that point. Okay, we'll make that the follow-up part.
Wow, that is a great callback. My dad listened to Tom. I mean, I still, in my playlist, National Brotherhood Week comes up. It is still one of my all-time favorite, maybe the Vatican Rag. I can name all of it. In fact, on YouTube, I've watched some of his concerts. New Math. Oh my God. So I'd love, and I've thought of that in a while, but my dad really, that's probably why I love music. I mean, he always played music. It wasn't necessarily his music, but it was fun.
One of the things you mentioned is advocating kids learning about finance. And I've always found it very stunning how that does not get touched on at all in any time through high school, except maybe balancing a checkbook. And I think there's so much power in being able to teach kids that, or having them learn it, that I'm just stunned that it's not more of a core curriculum.
Well, we're 14th in the world when it comes to financial literacy. All right. And I was very fortunate to meet someone named Neil Godfrey when I had my first financial radio show. When her book came out, which was Money Doesn't Grow on Trees, she wound up being Oprah's person. She's a very, very close friend now. We've been friends for years. And this was, she was the first woman banker at Chase Manhattan, and her story is amazing. But she had kids, and she wanted to teach them, and there was no books, there was nothing. And, I'll quote her, and I've quoted this a million times, but it is still easier for parents to have the sex talk than the money talk. And that hasn't changed. And then you take the schools, and I was on a committee with Neil to get financial literacy class mandated. So in New Jersey, you can't graduate high school without one semester of financial literacy. And, it was something. We needed to do something. And it's a problem, and it hasn't changed. And it's obviously, I think it's gotten harder and harder. Now, today, I used to joke in my talks about how, kids don't know how to write a check. Well, now who writes a check? So, I mean, that one went away. But so it's changed, but it is, trigonometry, algebra, calculus. Unless you are going in that world, and maybe you're going to figure out how to get to Mars, that's fine. But, why don't we teach the basic things like, you need a mortgage. How does that work? You need you're going to wind up taking care of your parents. Maybe you should look at all of the things that are out there that can help you take care of your parents without saying the words. So there are things that, are instruments that will help you. So I think as a parent, it was a big focus for us, obviously. And and my son's at Goldman Sachs. He's a REIT analyst. So I guess it worked with him. My daughter's a writer at People. sort of worked with her, but no, she's actually very financially savvy, and I just think it's really important, and that topic I think resonates still as much as it did ever before.
Mitch, one of the things we try and ask all of our guests on the show is about success, because you've obviously been successful in lots of different aspects of life, and people define it differently. So if you were going to define success, maybe outside the financial piece, not thinking about the money side, I mean, that's kind of the obvious part, but how would you define it?
Success for me is that my kids, who are both getting married, one in September and one in February, are really close still with me and my wife. And the fact that I've had a marriage of 39 years and someone that could put up with me for 39 years and 2 kids that are healthy and generally happy and doing well, that's success. Because at the end of the day, I mean, someone I had on my podcast, I can't remember who, talked about how life is about the dash. Nothing else matters, right? So if you go to every tombstone, it's going to say born 1960 and then died whatever, and there's a little dash in between. Oh, so what happens during that dash? And at the end of the day, and I heard someone talk about this the other day about legacy and how small we are when, you think of the world. And, we don't even know what William Shakespeare liked to eat for dinner or how his relationship was with his mother. I mean, people hundreds of years from now, they're not going to, maybe they'll find a video I did or something, but they're not going to remember me. And that's just a reality. So while I'm here, for me, success equals, a healthy, happy family, because that matters more than anything to me. Yeah. There are times I would say Springsteen tours. There are times that when it was a little rough with the kids, that I would say Springsteen tours, would being able to go to those shows could be considered success. But honestly, as Bruce has said, the older you get, the more it means.
I like the dash. That's good. I'm going to use that. I like that. So do you get into Springsteen shows for free now at this point? You still got to pay?
No, I pay, and my gravy train is up for about 15 years. Stephen, I would get my tickets through Stephen and Maureen, and I was just, he had to pay for his tickets for family and friends. So it was face value. So I would get face value into the pit. I wouldn't have to go in any line. I just walk right into the pit. This tour, he gave all his tickets to, he moved from Little Kids Rock to Teach Rock, which is a rock and roll education class for kids. And so they're raising money for that. So he put his tickets up for $5,000 each. So I'm like, buy my own ticket. And sitting behind the stage. And it was actually, after all the years in the pit, I kind of like seeing the views from different perspectives. I will be in the pit for the final show in DC in 2 weeks. But outside of that, no, I a couple times maybe I got in for free, but mostly I paid.
So, well, I'll hey, thanks for spending all this time with us. We want to like to end on this question, but you've met so many extraordinary people, and your life is fascinating. I mean, it's really interesting to hear all these stories. I'm sure you got a ton more, so I'll have to hear more later. But if you go back in time, it doesn't have to be somebody who's not alive anymore, but if anyone in history, either now or later, that you could go meet with, have a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever they're going to drink with you, who would you want to meet with, and what would you want to ask them or talk to them about?
So I'm going to give you 2 answers. The first is family related. I would give anything to meet my great grandparents, who lived in Eastern Europe, and I know very, very little about them. They died young, and I don't know. So that would be fascinating to meet family from a different generation. But I would say I'm a big Anglophile and I'm a big history guy. So to me, one of the most fascinating people of history, at least modern history, is Winston Churchill. I would love to sit down and have a scotch, because he would be drinking scotch, and talk to Churchill and try to understand how he made all of these decisions and how he was able to convince America to get in the war. And he's just you've seen the movies and everything, and I read a lot of the books, and I just find him more fascinating than anyone in American history other than maybe Lincoln. But I just find Winston Churchill just fascinating, and I would love to, have the opportunity to just not even talk and just listen to him tell stories. It's pretty amazing life.
Yeah, he's got a range is just an understatement, but the way he was leading the Allies in that context, plus the one-liners that are just all over the place.
Of course, yeah. No, we all have them on mugs and signs, and he was just pretty incredible. And it would definitely, I'm fortunate that I got to meet some of my heroes in life. Tom Seaver, I'm a big New York Mets fan, was an absolute hero of the franchise, and I got to meet him, and and through working for Larry, I met a lot of heroes, and obviously I've met Bruce a number of times. And I mean, he wouldn't know me if he was walking down the street, but I've met him. So, I'm lucky in all those things, but history, I love history. If I could do anything else besides what I'm doing, it would be to teach history.
Well, Mitch, you've been really generous with your time.
Thank you.
We just appreciate hearing these stories.
Sure.
I'm sure there's tons of more awesome stories, but yeah, thanks for spending the time with us. And
thanks for asking. I appreciate it. I'm not shy, so I enjoy telling these stories. I really do.
Yeah,
so thanks, guys.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck
All
with
right.
the show. I love the name.
Hey, appreciate it. All right, thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it. We'll catch up soon. Okay.
Will do.
See you now. All right.
Okay,
Bye.
You should. Do you want to do a quick intro for our guest, or do you want to do that later?